was this extraordinary image of the former prince captured?
An absolutely historic image. It is on the front page of all the newspapers.
All the UK newspapers.
That one image encapsulates the downfall of the former Duke of York.
A moment in history. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor arrested. So can the monarchy recover from this constitutional crisis?
You can't underestimate the enormity of this, how unprecedented this is. He is 8th in line to the throne.
And from Falklands war hero to fighting for his freedom, how did the former prince fall from grace?
I mean, it says everything you need to know about where he was and where he is now.
It is a very vulnerable time for the royal family.
Hello and welcome to Talking Royals. It's been less than 24 hours since our last episode, but we wanted to come back and give you all the latest updates on Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor after he was released from police custody.
Journalists are often accused of overusing words like historic, unprecedented, but yeah, this week was, let's just say this week wasn't normal.
No.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
You can't underestimate the enormity of this, how unprecedented this is. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is the brother of the king. He is 8th in line to the throne, and he has been arrested under suspicion of misconduct in a public office. We had scenes where we saw police cars arriving at the Sandringham estate, the royal family's private residence in Norfolk, early on Thursday morning, and Andrew being taken into police custody. So yes, this really is an unprecedented week for the royal family.
And so last night, I'm going to fast forward to 7 o'clock last night when he was released, and we were live doing ITV Evening News at that point. And what I remember is us sort of having a conversation, us going to one of our reporters and you sort of saying, we've got a picture, he's been released. You two had been on the phone with each other, you'd found out he'd been released. We were trying to see if we could get a photograph of him, and then you showed me.
I showed you
that picture.
Yes.
And Lizzie, you saw it, you were one of the first in the world to see that picture of him crouching down in the back of a car, leaving the police station in Aylsham.
No, I showed you the picture. Your jaw kind of dropped. I think mine did as well. What was your reaction when you first saw it?
Exactly that. Yeah. I mean, he is reclining in the back of that car. That car, I'm told, left Aylsham police station at speed, trying to obviously, they were aware that they must have been aware that there were photographers and cameras outside, so sped away. But the photographer, Phil Noble, from Reuters, captured that image. And I think, it is an absolutely historic image. It is on the front page of all the newspapers.
All the UK newspapers.
But the photograph encapsulates, doesn't it? That one image, the old famous expression, a picture paints 1,000 words. That one image encapsulates the downfall of the former Duke of York, the former Prince Andrew, the former favourite son of the late Queen Elizabeth. I mean, and then there he is in the back of the car, kind of leaning back as if he was. I mean,
do you think
we could argue in hindsight you should have got that a lot lower if you wanted to avoid the cameras.
Do you think there is a world in which he didn't realise that there would be quite so many photographers out and about waiting to take?
No, because that was the whole reason he was like this in the back. Because,
but as you say, there were ways to sit in the back of a car where you were not pictured.
Of course,
is what I'm trying to say.
So in other words, I don't know. Maybe he thought, this is enough of a reclining position. I don't know. And you often see photographers, don't you? Like maybe outside court when they sort of take flashes into a police van. They're all trying to get that kind of image. 99% of the time it doesn't work. You just don't get anything. True. I mean, all credit to Phil Noble for getting that picture. A bit of luck, but also a lot of skill, I'm sure, because the whole world is running that, and it does tell you everything you need to know. Okay, Prince Andrew, not found guilty of anything. He's not been charged with anything.
He's always denied.
Yeah. All the allegations against him, and we should be clear, this is about misconduct in public office. It's nothing to do with the allegations that Virginia Giuffre and others have made about him. But that photo, I mean, it says everything you need to know about where he was and where he is now. And he is a suspect who was questioned by police for 11 hours on his birthday. I mean, that's said it all.
I mean, everything that happens now within that royal family this weekend can only be speculation. No one knows the conversations they're likely to be having. We just simply don't know that. But Will the family itself go into crisis mode now? Will we see any other statements that are coming out? Are they going to be continuing their normal everyday life? You know, what does crisis mode at this point look like for the royal family?
Well, what I found interesting yesterday is Chris referenced the statement that we received from the King. This statement was signed Charles R. It wasn't a statement from Buckingham Palace, which is what we quite often get, but it was also the speed of which this statement came out. We found out at 10 a.m. that Andrew had been arrested. By midday, we had a statement from the King in the King's words, and he said, "Let me state clearly, the law must take its course," which, you know, he couldn't have been any clearer.
Alongside, and we talked about the newspapers, alongside that photo was pretty much most of the newspapers around that line, didn't they? The law must take its course, and that came from the guy who is the law. He is Crown versus whatever. You know, when you go to a court and it's Crown versus the individual. The Crown, that's the King.
That is the King.
This is him saying the law must take its course. My brother is not immune.
And, the royal family have, for months, for years, faced, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has overshadowed the work that they have been trying to do, particularly in the last few weeks. This statement from the King does say that my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all. And I think we have seen that. They have tried to continue with the day-to-day engagements, with their tours abroad. We saw on Thursday, the day he was arrested, the King, the Queen, Princess Anne, all out and about trying to continue with business as usual. But again, the headlines are all about Andrew Mountbatten.
And he was asked a question by a journalist, wasn't he, when he was on the way?
More than one. There were quite a few shouts to him.
Well, there were quite a few shouts to him as he was on the way into that show at London Fashion Week, which was to celebrate African designers. Let's take a look.
Your Majesty, how are you feeling after your brother's arrest? Your Majesty, how are you feeling after your brother's arrest? Have you spoken to your brother, Your Majesty?
And look, the easiest thing in the world to have done would be to have cancelled that, so you didn't get people shouting at you when you arrived. People in the palace will say the King's used to it. He's been around a long time. He's heard heckles. He's heard shouts. And the other thing is, we ain't going to cancel anything because otherwise his brother is, impacting our work. And why did the King want to go to that event yesterday? Because he thought it was really important to celebrate African designers. He thought it was really important to, to tell the world that London Fashion Week, that's part of his job. And he will keep doing that. The trouble is, you heard the questions there. Bang.
And there is no doubt that this reign so far has been so overshadowed by his brother Andrew. When we look back since the King came to the throne, so much of that we've been talking about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. We've got headlines this week about the Crown in crisis. And, many people are saying that it is a very vulnerable time for the royal family, and how do they navigate
Moment
this?
of jeopardy. I suppose let's discuss here. Where does this sit in crises? Is it the 1936 abdication crisis when King Edward VIII said, "I don't want this anymore"? Is it the 1997 Diana died and the Queen, late Queen, is staying in Balmoral and didn't come to London? Is it the Harry and Meghan accusations of racism? Where does this fit?
I think when you
people keep asking me that, so I'm going to ask you.
Well, I think when you have pictures of unmarked police cars going onto the King's estate to arrest his brother, then take his brother to Elsham police station, to then see pictures of his brother leaving the police station, presumably to go back home to the Sandringham
looking
estate.
like a sort of like a deer in a headlight, isn't it? It would
Exactly. And I think what that says to the world globally, the King is a global figure. The royal family is a global family. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody in the world who was not aware of the royal family. These are the headlines globally. And when it comes to dealing with crises and what have you, I would say this is up there.
Yeah, to put this into some kind of context, the last time a member of the royal family was taken into custody was more than 350 years ago.
This is our favourite fact. Charles I.
Yeah.
1647.
Yeah, there we go.
Let's not dwell on what happened to him, of course. 2 years later, he lost his head, and we had 10 years...
But we don't do that anymore.
10 years without... we don't. We had 10 years without a monarchy. That was the last time a member of the royal family was taken into custody by police.
I know that he has... What's the technical term? He has been released...
Released under investigation.
Under investigation. So if there is a world where he is charged and is in court and is found guilty. Obviously, none of that stuff I'm talking about hypotheticals now.
Okay.
Is there any way in the world that we could see a member of the royal family locked up in jail?
I mean, the king says it himself. The law must take its course. So Andrew is not going to be treated any differently to any member of the public just because he's a member of the royal family.
And the offence of misconduct in public office is punishable with a prison sentence.
There'll be an older generation of viewers who'll be well versed in how his story was told back in the day and the headlines and what have you and the things that he's been famous for. But there's also a younger generation that probably isn't really aware of just how loved he was. He's a Falklands war hero, and we've got pictures of when he came back, and the adulation was huge for him, wasn't he, at that point?
Flying helicopters in the Falklands War, a war that, ended up being a benefit to a prime minister at the time as well. But yeah, he was a war hero, and there he is, sporting a fine beard in the Royal Navy, which was his job at the time, and flying helicopters. He was, as you say, very well liked.
He was incredibly well liked.
And a bachelor at the time as well, since his pre-wedding.
You're asked to put on your anti-flash and then invited to lie on the deck in the ship, because when a missile or something hits, the whiplash is such that you would probably break a few bones if you're not supported in any way. And being made to lie down in a ship is the most lonely feeling I think you'll ever get, of being there, lying on the deck, with your hands over there just to protect your face, lying on the deck, waiting for either a bang or the all clear.
This picture's incredible. This is when he came back, and people throwing roses at him. Like, that's such a stark difference between the person he is then and how he is viewed now.
We said it earlier, the fall from grace,
Yeah.
Put those two pictures, that one with the rose in his mouth, and then the one that we got this week of him
Polar
coming
opposites.
out of a police station.
Polar opposites.
And also often considered by many, sort of widely reported as being the late Queen's favourite son, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that perhaps he could do no wrong, which one could argue is why we are in the situation at the moment, is because of the way he was viewed by her. But we've got the wedding even to Fergie, and it was viewed by 500 million people. I mean, the levels at which we're talking at the moment, I think we've got shots of that as well, footage of that as well. He was loved, but then we sort of get into, I don't know, the difficult periods in terms of the headlines where he was concerned, and of which there've been quite a few. And I'm not just talking about the ones in the more recent history, but from back then. And
even when he was a trade envoy, you got what were the headlines? He was called Randy Andy regularly in the tabloids. He was also called Air Miles Andy, because there was, even before these more serious allegations, which he has denied, came to light, there were newspaper headlines that here's a guy who liked flying around the world on jets and private jets, hence the Air Miles Andy. And where did Randy Andy come from? Well, the papers were writing these headlines way before these allegations came to light.
Because of course he came back as a Falklands war hero, and he is a working royal, so they had to sort of give him work to do, and that's where the trade envoy thing comes in, doesn't it?
Yeah, he was a trade envoy from 2001 to 2011, and a trade envoy is basically trying to sort of support and drive economic growth in areas of interest to the UK government, and it is that period when he was working as a trade envoy where the recent drop of Epstein files, the 3 million documents that have come out, that is where these allegations have come from, that he was potentially sharing confidential information with Jeffrey Epstein when he was in that role. And that is where those allegations have come from, and the arrest of misconduct in a public office, where that has come from.
And when we spoke to, you and I spoke to Catherine Mayer yesterday, who's a royal biographer, and she travelled with the then Prince Andrew on one of these trade envoy missions, didn't she? And she gave some really interesting insight when we spoke to her.
Yes, it was quite some time ago that she travelled with him. This is the problem when you've got the heir and then you've got a load of siblings. And what was the title of Harry's book? Spare. So Andrew, coming out of the Royal Navy, clearly felt like, or people around him felt like he was a bit of a spare. Give him a job. Okay, go off around the world and do this trade envoy thing. But the interesting thing that Catherine said to you, to get back to your question, was that he did say to her, well, you know, sometimes I wonder what I'm doing, and maybe perhaps I should have just been a plumber.
But, you know, there's a book out this week, isn't there, which goes into details about William's thoughts regarding his uncle.
Yeah, so this is a new book from the Daily Mirror's royal editor, Russell Myers. It is called William and Catherine, an intimate inside story, and it has just been serialised ahead of its publication next week. And one of the lines in that book is that Prince William, after the Andrew's disastrous Newsnight interview in 2019, wanted to see his uncle Andrew, who he's never been a huge fan of. He wanted to see him banished, to quote the book, before the rot set in.
Wow.
What we kind of know, don't we, what William thinks of his uncle Andrew without a word ever being spoken. Because if you remember at the Duchess of Kent's funeral at the end of last year, Andrew, I can't remember whether he was Prince or not then, I think he still was.
He was then,
went up to his nephew William and tried to engage him in conversation outside the cathedral. And you could just tell from William's face that he wanted the guy to just get away from me.
Yeah.
And even actually a senior member of the Palace, Kensington Palace staff, said to me the other day, "Oh, remember that. You know, that's what he feels."
There's a line in the book as well.
Why wasn't he backed on this in terms of? I'm not saying that Prince William can foresee the future, but he sort of could see the path in which perhaps this was going down reputationally for the royal family.
And I think things were done. You know, Prince Andrew at the time, as he was, stopped working as a member of the royal family. He then also agreed to stop using HRH. And
he lost his military affiliation.
And his royal patronages.
And then everything went quiet for a while, didn't it?
But I think what William wanted to see was them to go a lot further. And there's also a story in the book about how there was a Christmas at Sandringham where Fergie and Andrew were invited, and William really didn't want that, and apparently was put in his place by Charles at the time, who, I think saw that as a family occasion, and Andrew and Fergie were still being invited to those family occasions.
Yeah, and we heard stories at that Sandringham event where, you know, when they come out of church after the service and they sort of greet some members of the public and then they go off for lunch. Guess who hung around for a very long time to talk to members of the public? Guess who were enjoying the attention that they were getting from members of the public there on Christmas Day?
Okay.
The former Prince and Sarah Ferguson. And I think somebody told me that they had to ask him to go behind the gate and into the house so they could lock the gate. Please, sir, can you just stop talking to members?
Yeah.
They were enjoying it that much.
And I think this sort of leads us on to one of the big questions in all of this is, you know, when you say, did William think they should have gone further sooner? Well, yes, and a lot of people think, did the late Queen go far enough? You know, was she sort of blinded by her love for her son, which she continued to show support for? Remember those images of Prince Philip's memorial service where she came into that service with Andrew on her arm. And so, a lot of the focus has been on questions around whether she did enough.
Yes. Before I look ahead to next week, there were some interesting comments from Donald Trump this week regarding the king, because considering where this story starts, which is in the States, Jeffrey Epstein, the story starts in the States. How much legal action is going on in the States right now? Exactly.
None.
And yet, the king, is he still planning on travelling to the States?
Well, Lizzie and I can tell you what normally happens is they don't tell us that something's happening, and then you kind of get wind that something's happening, and then it happens, and then they announce it. Well,
we're at the got wind stage.
We're at the got wind stage, and we've been talking about it for a while, actually. Didn't we even say last year, let's make the visit happen by talking about it so much?
Yeah.
Well, actually, it turns out that we do think it's happening in April, that the king is going to go to America. And guess what Donald Trump said on Air Force One this week?
Let's take a listen.
I think it's a shame. I think it's very sad. I think it's so bad for the royal family. It's a very, very sad. To me, it's a very sad thing. When I see that, it's a very sad thing to see it, and to see what's going on with his brother, who's obviously coming to our country very soon, and he's fantastic man, the king. So I think it's a very sad thing.
So when he comes to our country, in other words, he's kind of given away that this visit is happening, and therefore you've not only got the problem of all the things that Donald Trump says, for example, our forces didn't fight on the front line in Afghanistan, and we've spoken about that before, but you've got all the problems now with Epstein. Why is it in the UK you've got Peter Mandelson under criminal investigation, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor under criminal investigation? What's happening in the US, where Jeffrey Epstein lived, where his homes were in New York and on the US Virgin Isles? And I think even some of the American media now are waking up to the fact of, well, due process is taking place in the UK. Why is due process not happening in the US?
Well, we'll see what happens with that over the coming months. But I remember I was talking about that statement when it was released on Thursday from the King, where, you know, they said they're going to still do their service, and that service to the British people. So over the coming week, have we had any word that anything's been cancelled, or are they still going ahead as normal?
I think, you know, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all. And I think, you know, we've seen this week them continuing, even on the day that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was arrested, we saw them out and about and continuing with that duty and service and those engagements. So I would expect over the coming weeks for them to do exactly the same and to continue trying to do their best to focus on those engagements and those causes that they're trying to highlight.
Just as we said earlier, I spoke to a senior palace source, and they said, yes, like, we're not having Andrew dictating what the King is doing. People will want to see him. They expect him at events. He is going to do them. I know there are events planned for next week. We don't know what they are yet, but they're not being scratched out of the diary, put it that way.
That's all we've got time for. We will be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe for all the latest royal updates. But for now, bye-bye.